Government takes measures for a tentative school resumption on June 1, 2020, with strict prescriptions to guarantee the safety of pupils and teachers. An outline of the specifications of the new program in this newscast. The COVID-19 response strategy intensifies with the construction of isolation centers to better cater for patients. The annex unit number 2 of the Central Hospital of Yaoundé is almost complete. Defense forces work tirelessly to maintain the peace and unity of Cameroon, from camps set up in border localities to the cracking down of armed groups. Their role in nation building and its challenges is highlighted. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Those were the headlines of the 7:30 news. We begin our half-hour newscast with the school resumption in the basic and secondary education sectors tentatively scheduled for the 1st of June 2020. During the weekly interministerial meeting chaired by Prime Minister Joseph John Goutey to monitor government's COVID-19 response strategy, specifications on the opening were made. Star Building correspondent Sisako Tamko reports on the modalities which guarantee the safety of pupils and teachers.
Resumption of classes at the level of basic and secondary education across the national territory on June 1 remains tentative, and any decision depends on the latest development of the COVID-19 situation in the country. As stated by Prime Minister John Goutey, the head of state is against a blank school year, but the health and safety of the children is of utmost importance, given that the pandemic has no respect for age, gender, or societal background. The whole educational system has been affected by the pandemic, which took everyone off guard, and as the education authorities prepare programs for resumption at the tentative date of June 1, the head of government instructed the ministers of basic and secondary education to ensure that barrier measures are strictly respected. Pupils, students, and teachers are expected to wear masks, be armed with sanitizers, and the seating capacity does not exceed a certain number, which means social distancing should be strictly observed. In the same manner, to ensure a COVID-free environment, classrooms must be disinfected, as well as the entire school premises. According to the Prime Minister's instructions, only examination classes will resume on the tentative June 1 in the basic and secondary education. Classes are for pupils expected to write the Common Entrance and First School Leaving Certificate, the GCO Ordinary and Advanced Level for the English subsection. The cours moyen day for those writing the CEP, BEPC in the classe des troisième, for both general and technical education, the 4e année where they write the CAP, and at the classe des premiers where they sit for the probatoire and later baccalaureate in the French subsystem. With the approval from the head of state, the school calendar has been readjusted to organize examinations between July and August and holidays at the end of August. For the 2020-21 school year, resumption has been slated on the 5th of October at both the basic and secondary levels. The strategies put in place by the education authorities to ensure that students continue their learning during this shutdown period will continue.
Prime Minister Joseph John Goutey has reaffirmed the government's volition to ensure that Cameroonians stay safe from the coronavirus. The head of government provided updates on the evolution of the pandemic in a communication that just ended. Here's an excerpt of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, head of government, Joseph John Goutey, in a moment, updating Cameroonians on the evolution of the coronavirus pandemic in the country. Let's take a listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you are probably aware, Cameroon, like many other countries in the world, has been facing the coronavirus pandemic for several months now. The update on the evolution of this pandemic in our country shows that 2,910 cases have already been reported. To date, 1,697 patients have recovered their health, while we regret the loss of 139 persons. The death rate is 4.7%, while the recovery rate is almost 60%. As for our current screening capacity, it is improving day by day. The delivery of additional kits already ordered in the next few days should substantially increase our screening capacity. In addition, the scientific committee is considering how to take into account products from traditional pharmacopoeia in the treatment protocol. As we can see, the recovery rate of the coronavirus continues to improve. However, the continuing increase in the number of infected persons prompts us to intensify our prudence, diligence, and perseverance in the implementation of the actions undertaken in the fight against this virus. It is for this reason that the President of the Republic, His Excellency Paul Biya, has decided to extend for an additional 15 days, renewable if necessary, the measures still in force within the framework of the fight against COVID-19. It should be recalled that in view of the difficulties experienced by businessmen in certain sectors of activity and households, the head of state decided on 30th April to relax some of the restrictions imposed in the fight against this virus and to grant various facilities to sectors severely weakened by this pandemic. The support measures taken in favor of households and enterprises relate to the increase in the level of family allowances, the cancellation of penalties for late payment of Social Security contributions, the postponement of the payment of certain taxes, and various tax and customs exemptions. Ladies and gentlemen, with regard to schools and universities, as well as vocational training centers and professional schools, which were closed on 17th March 2020, the President of the Republic has decided to reopen them on the indicative date of 1st June 2020, depending on the evolution of the coronavirus pandemic in our country. However, in order to respect social distancing measures and avoid the spread of the virus in the school environment, the head of state has decided that the resumption of classes in primary and secondary schools will exclusively concern examination classes in the two subsystems of education. In the French-speaking subsystem of education, these include cours moyen deuxième année for primary education and the classes of troisième, première, and terminale for secondary education. For the English-speaking subsystem of education, these include Class 6 in the primary education field, Form 5 and Upper 6th for secondary education. Appropriate measures shall be taken by the Ministers of Basic Education and Secondary Education to ensure that the pupils and students concerned by the resumption of classes are properly distributed in classrooms while respecting the rules of social distancing. The President of the Republic has also instructed that the ministers in charge of the education sector to take all useful and necessary measures aimed at making available at the entrance of each public or private school and university the required sanitary kits such as hand sanitizers, thermoflashes, and hand washing basins. It goes without saying that the wearing of protective masks will be compulsory for pupils, students, and teachers on school grounds and university campuses. I would like to point out in this connection that the parents of pupils who wish to provide protective masks for their children can do so. Those who do not have masks will be provided free of charge. in their institutions of reference in accordance with arrangements to be specified by the competent ministers. The ministers of basic and secondary education will also ensure the closure of the 2019-2020 school year and the handing of report cards to the intermediate primary and secondary school students on the basis of evaluations carried out during the first and second terms. As for the handing of the report cards, I would like to specify that they will be collected in the schools by the parents or their representatives according to a schedule to be defined by the head of the school, the objective being to avoid groupings in the school premises. Ladies and gentlemen, sensitive to the distress of his compatriots stranded abroad for various reasons, following the closure of borders, the head of state has instructed the government to take care of their repatriation. The first contingent of 795 of our compatriots returned to Cameroon in the month of March and April 2020. The repatriation operations of the second contingent began on 9th of May and have enabled 930 Cameroonians to return home, representing a total of 1,725 persons already repatriated. As soon as they arrived in Cameroon, they were taken care of in accordance with the health and confinement protocol in force. The identification of our compatriots who are still stranded in various countries is being done by our diplomatic representations with a view to their repatriation. In conclusion, I would like to appeal once again to our common and individual sense of responsibility to strive to limit the spread of the coronavirus pandemic in our country. As I have said on several occasions, prevention remains the main weapon available to each and every one of us. That is why I would like to reiterate my appeal to each and every one of us to scrupulously respect the barrier gestures and measures taken by the government to combat this disease. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
That was Prime Minister Joseph John Gote coming back to some of the measures taken by government, which has experienced a 15-day extension. The indefinite resumption of schools announced coincides with the end of the special distance learning program titled Focus on Exams and on CRTV. Today's final lessons were attended by the Minister of Basic Education, Professor Laurent Serge Etundingwa, and CRTV's Director General, Charles Ndongo. They lauded the success of the initiative, which lasted 6 weeks and envisaged a possible continuation of the concept. Cynthia Saptala reports.
Like Rome. Just know that it is the
distance learning on the national airwaves comes to its end. For 6 weeks, teachers in collaboration with CRTV's productions had the task of providing lessons to examination classes during the pandemic.
It's been a huge challenge coming on air, and we know we are not being watched only in Cameroon.
With time, with the other lessons that I was presenting after, we were gradually getting used to.
A task that wasn't easy, as it needed a dedicated crew and committed teachers to provide visual and educational content from Monday to Saturday.
CRTV have improved a way of conceiving and giving programs to the public.
With examinations around the corner, CRTV's boss and its partner ministries were present for one of the final lessons this Friday.
This innovation must not be an innovation again. It must be a practice, a Republican practice in the field of education. And we are waiting for the orientation the Prime Minister, head of government, will give for maybe the continuation of this very, very special way to educate Cameroonians in the future.
As the curtains close on tele-teaching on national television, students and pupils have been encouraged to visit the different CRTV websites for corrections while waiting to regain their classrooms and teachers eventually.
Today is the International Family Day, observed to promote awareness of issues relating to the family and processes affecting its survival. Celebrated on the theme Families and Developments, this year's focus is on the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlights the importance of investing in social policies that protect the most vulnerable. The Minister of Women's Empowerment and the Family, Professor Marie-Theresa Binaundua, spotlights the family's challenge in the face of crisis. Take a listen.
The 26th edition of the International Day of the Family is taking place within a health crisis context, marked by the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic hitting the entire world, with hundreds of thousands of deaths, a worrisome situation which unfortunately did not spare our country. The present commemoration gives me the opportunity to call on communities, families, parents, and children to strictly observe government prescriptions, which mainly are: wash your hands thoroughly and regularly with soap and running water, or clean them with a hydroalcoholic solution. Wear a protective mask systematically in public spaces and public transports. Though the treatment requires to stay away from family members, COVID-19 patients or people placed under quarantine need our solidarity, our support, our affection. They should neither be stigmatized nor humiliated.
The United States of America plans to increase health assistance to Cameroon to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. The U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, His Excellency Henry Peter Ballerin, unveiled the commitment during an audience granted him by the Minister of External Relations, His Excellency Lejeune Belambela. Both officials also discussed cooperation ties between their two nations, as Chief International Correspondent Charles Ebune reports.
At least 1 million Americans are infected with the coronavirus, which has killed at least 84,000 other Americans.
We've injected millions, and there's millions more coming, both from our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and also from the U.S. Agency for International Development.
The United States was one of the earliest countries to financially assist Cameroon to the tune of roughly 71 million CFA francs to withstand the storm of the coronavirus.
We have a strong commitment to working with the government of Cameroon in combating HIV/AIDS and malaria.
Today's audience between the U.S. ambassador to Cameroon and the External Relations Minister also focused on easing airspace for citizens of both countries to return to their respective countries.
I wanted to come here and to thank personally the Minister for all of his cooperation that he's shown in helping us to evacuate so many American citizens. We're also committed to helping Cameroonians who want to come back to Cameroon from the United States.
Earlier in the day, the Chargé d'Affaires of the Nigerian High Commission in Yaoundé had held talks with Minister Lejeune Belambela.
We discussed serious issues concerning our bilateral relationship and ways we can improve it, and which borders a lot on security and friendly neighborliness.
All meetings were held with the respect of sanitary rules established to make coronavirus a history.
And now on to one of our top stories. The planned aid of friendly states add up to the country's efforts to contain the contagious virus. In Yaoundé, work is almost complete at the isolation center in the Vokbi neighborhood, expected to receive COVID-19 patients from the central hospital. The makeshift wards have been equipped with admission beds and a disinfection unit installed for the medical personnel. Baldwin Sama takes us to the Okar Isolation Center and reports on its transformation.
Beds placed accordingly in different sections of this center, telling signs of how this center will soon go operational. Close to 320 beds will be used here at all levels by COVID-19 patients, as officials of the construction company say emphasis is laid on the patient's comfort. A lift is available for the patients upon arrival, and after recovery, they will use the exit door to leave this isolation center. Well-constructed toilets are equally available here with air conditioners. There is a disinfection unit to be used by the different medical personnel before and after working with the COVID-19 patients.
After administering drugs, he leaves the patient's ward and goes back to his own zone, where he undresses and removes every infected item before moving to a clean environment through a different itinerary.
This isolation center gets ready to welcome the first patients in the days ahead.
In the Far North region, the repressive phase to enforce government's response plan to the coronavirus has begun. The senior divisional officer for Diamari, Jean-Marc Ekwambarga, accompanied by the forces of law and order, have been carrying out systematic checks to ensure the permanent wearing of face masks in public places. Sylvester Atemking reports that defaulters have been promised hard times.
The decision by President Paul Biya to soften some restrictive measures, like the functioning of bars and some leisure spots beyond 6 p.m., has been erroneously perceived by some inhabitants of the Far North region as the end of the coronavirus. Hence, some people do not bother to wear face masks, let alone respect social distance. Despite the enthusiasm that has characterized the distribution of the Head of State Special Anti-COVID package, a good number of people in the Far North region still seem to take the pandemic as a joke. It is in line with this ill-informed behavior that the senior division officer for Diamari, along joint police and gendarmerie squads, have embarked on some repressive methods to enforce the compulsory wearing of masks for all. Our mission is to make sure that the people wear their masks always to protect themselves and others. That is why we are out today. Diamari's SDO, accompanied by the security and defense forces, also visited markets and some busy neighborhoods of Marowa for the same exercise.
The negligence and irresponsible behavior of many Cameroonians who misconstrue the easing of government directives to check the spread of COVID-19 have led to a rise in the number of infections. Administrative authorities and security forces have thus been enjoined to ensure that the wearing of face masks is obligatory and that physical distancing is respected. Baldwin Summer is at the Public Health Emergency Operations Center and says that containing the coronavirus warrants collective effort. Unfortunately, he says no case of recovery has been recorded today. Hello, Baldwin.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Public Health Emergency Operations Center this Friday evening, where the information is there has been no case of recovery from COVID-19 recorded in Cameroon this Friday. Notwithstanding, officials of the Public Health Emergency Operations Center say we may have more and more recoveries to be recorded in the days or in the hours ahead, given that they keep on receiving statistics or figures from the different regions of the country concerned with the spread of COVID-19. However, they say the number of persons who get infected keeps increasing on a daily basis. This is simply because more and more Cameroonians have simply stopped respecting the different outlined measures by the governments to stop the spread of COVID-19. Officials of the Public Health Emergency Operations Center they were telling us a while ago that they are presently working on a modus operandi. That's to say, some measures that should be respected before, during, and after the resumption of classes for primary school pupils and secondary school students on the tentative date of June 1, 2020. This year, some of the measures to stop the spread of COVID-19, given that when classes resume on June 1, it will be quite risky for these pupils and these students, and that is why they're working on these measures that will go a long way to stop the spread of COVID-19 when classes resume on June 1. They say they have never stopped and they won't stop reminding Cameroonians of the necessity to continue respecting the different barrier measures, and every Cameroonian is called upon to report any suspected case of an individual around his or her vicinity with any symptom of COVID-19, because together it will go a long way to stop the spread of coronavirus. So the take-home message from here tonight is that no case of recovery from COVID-19 has been recorded. Back to you.
Baldwin will now take you over to the West region, where the population of Nun Division have been urged to guard against religious practices that put them at risk to contract the coronavirus. The Secretary of State at the Ministry of Public Health, in charge of epidemics and pandemics, Ali Mayatu, made the admonition during a working visit to the area. Gu Henry Tiesambe has the details of the session, grouping administrative authorities as well as traditional rulers in Fumban.
The West region, as at May 13, registered 170 cases of the COVID-19, 65 recoveries and 11 deaths. The Noon division is ranked second with 51 cases after the Mifi with 57. 35 of the 51 from the Noon were registered within a week. The president of the Regional Committee to Fight Against the Pandemic, Awa Fonko Augustine, has attributed it to the non-respect of measures to fight the coronavirus and the organization of crowd-pulling events like what they call Adua and Sadaka, rituals before and after burial, marriages and group prayers during this fasting period. The Secretary of State in the Ministry of Public Health has met with the authorities of the division.
It's even a problem, not only Bamun problem, only Cameroonian problem, on African problem. It's all nations in this world the concern of COVID-19.
He equally visited the Fumban District Hospital and met the Sultan of the Bamums, Senator Ibrahim Bombon Joya.
Cameroon's lawmaking institution, the National Assembly, stands out as one of the symbols of national unity. The House of the People's representatives from the 10 regions with different political leanings, just like the reunification monument, instill in Cameroonians a sense of belonging and oneness. Tonight, Charles Ebounet looks at these monuments and buildings in Cameroon, which symbolize national unity.
Today housing the Yaoundé Pilot Linguistic Center. This is the pioneer National Assembly building of post-1960 constituted Cameroon from the federal experience. The People's House, where their lawmakers meet, it is also the arena for the swearing-in ceremony of the country's first public servant, their president.
I do so swear.
Operating from year to day, this building was inaugurated some 55 years ago as one of the key symbols of national unity as the people's elected converge here for them for the common good. Just a sight from the National Assembly complex is this towering architectural testimonial baptized the Reunification Monument. Constructed by Cameroonians years ago, this is the most perfect symbol of Cameroon, telling the complete merging of Cameroonian history, a German, English and French political construct, former West and East Cameroons, the cultural melting pot from the 4 cultural zones, and above all, the oneness of Cameroon through a fatherly, motherly figure full of tenderness. The Yaoundé May 20 Boulevard, the nation's most classic ceremonial ground, can welcome dignitaries each year except this year to celebrate the unity of one of the first 6 nations in the world with plus 300 tongues, Cameroon.
The 5th Rapid Intervention Battalion in the Damawa region is running a camp in the border locality of Ngawi. Since April 15 this year, the presence of the defense forces in the area, which shares boundaries with the Central African Republic, has reduced to the barest minimum the number of kidnappings and hostage taken. In the following report, Amos Enonyaketagbo outlines the role played by the military in maintaining peace.
Ngawi spread on a surface area of 2,307 kilometers square with a population head count of about 25,000 inhabitants, used to harbor the largest cattle market in the Central African sub-region. With the instability of neighboring Central African Republic since 2012, cattle theft, kidnappings and the request for exorbitant ransom and other forms of criminal activities sunk the economy of the once vibrant subdivision. Today, the active presence of the defense forces in the localities seen in the setting up of a unit of the 5th Rapid Intervention Battalion since April 15, 2020 speaks volumes of the Cameroon government's quest to secure the local population and their property from the excesses of the armed groups who have been stealing supplies and taking scores of people hostage for ransom. The elements of the defense forces will not only seek to protect the local population and Cameroon's territorial integrity, but also create a favorable environment for an effective return of gainful economic activities.
The Cameroon Navy is organizing a series of activities to mark the Armed Forces Day on May 20. Although there will be no celebration in pomp due to the coronavirus scare, the soldiers have been showcasing their rich military arsenal at the Kribi Naval Base of the 1st Military Combined Region. Ewane Epole presents the floating dock purchased recently at the base.
The Kribi Naval Base Cosco Bank has a special branch that manages this floating dock.
A floating dock is a metallical structure that we can see there. So it's floating, and you can go into the water until a certain deepness. It's the first one in the army. So we got it through the cooperation between China and Cameroon. When we put the ship out of the water, we first move all the dirt. After we'll treat and apply paint. A technical problem, we are able to do it because not far off here we have a workshop where we can repair some part of the ship, part of the ship concerning the power plant, generator and steering. We have already repaired 3 ships, 3 Navy ships, and in the near future normally we're supposed to receive a bigger ship around 30 meters.
The soldiers also work 24/7 at the Surveillance Operations Center, surveying the South Coast Sea borders of neighboring countries with Cameroon to check the movements of ships.
Let's now make a stopover at the Southwest region, precisely in Boya, the town of legendary hospitality, which is today an abode to many Cameroonian. In Clark's quarters, for example, about 80% of shop owners are not natives of Boya, a town hustling and bustling with activity. Kange Williams Wasa Loko now tells us how these individuals are coping away from their native lands.
This is Clark's Quarters, the business nerve center of Boya, the headquarters of the Southwest region, with business bustling as usual. About 80% of those who own shops or trade in this area are non-natives, some of whom were either born here or settled in the area.
I'm from the Northwest region, precisely from Kokotunja division. I've been here for 20 years now. Where most of the Bakorians are my friends. I go closer to them, I make them to be my friends, so that I can even learn how to speak their dialect.
Even though they are far away from their native land, they have found home out of home.
Actually, there's need for national unity because I don't like to separate myself from somebody to say you are an Anglophone, I'm a Francophone. We are all Cameroonians.
Living together is a reality, even in the hearts of the village setting.
The idea of national unity in the Southwest continues. We all have in our villages our quarter heads and people who come from places that are not within our little villages. We intermingle and there's no problem.
Despite the socio-political crisis rocking the region, the people of the Southwest region are assured of their security during this festive period.
We do our best to ensure the security. So no matter how, we'll be at the set to do our work. So there's no reason to be afraid.
Away from security, culinary art is another important component of national unity in Cameroon. Traditional meals from all tribes and ethnic groups are relished regardless of the place of origin of the consumers. To get a feel of just how rich and diverse Cameroon's cuisine is, let's follow Beatrice Lawsumber to some restaurants and kitchens in Yaoundé.
Oh, the enticing flavor from that pot of eru. Nothing beats this taste bud sensation. All you need is water fufu to accompany the eru soup.
It's a meal from the Bayang tribe, and we cook it here every day because so many people love to eat it.
This eating house in Etukebe, Yaoundé routinely serves a new Cameroonian delicacy from the rich food culture of the country. Patychou, that white dike with a yellow sea in the middle. Fufu corn, njama and kati, which chicken soup will make you forget your manners and eat all the bones too.
I'm from the Northwest region. We have a variety of foods like achu, kati, and other stuffs that we cook here in Nantar. But then we are diverse in that we also cook eru, kondre, even from the Bamileke side.
And there are as many dishes as there are cooks.
I really like to share the menu of Anglophone side. When I'm cooking my fufu and japche, I will give her and she will appreciate it as the children.
This 2-ingredient food, ekwang, grated cocoyams in fresh cocoyam leaves. You can't resist going back for more. And magic happens when couscous de riz is served with foleri or nkenen soup.
J'aime ça.
It's simply tasty, he says. I keep coming for this meal, which is not typical of the center region where I come from. It's a delicacy from the north. Tough listing all the tasty dishes of Cameroon, which coming from diverse cultures are consumed just wherever by whoever, with no barriers to these foods from what is naturally our home country.
In diplomacy, Cameroon and Israel are working towards strengthening cooperation ties and exploring new horizons in the economic sector. This was during an audience granted to the Israeli ambassador to Cameroon, His Excellency Isi Yanuka, by the Minister of Finance, Louis-Paul Motaze. Their discussions also centered on the improvement of agricultural ventures and the supply of water. Here's an excerpt of the Israeli ambassador to Cameroon after the audience.
I came here to meet the minister. It's a courtesy meeting. It's the first time I'm seeing the minister since my arrival 3 months ago, and we've discussed potential ways of perhaps enhancing the collaboration between the two countries, and even the possibilities for private companies, Israeli companies, to come and work here and invest in Cameroon.
The government's agency in charge of regulating the advertising sector in Cameroon has a new board chair. The senior civil administrator, Amadou Bello, was elected and installed today during an extraordinary board meeting of Cameroon Public Expansion. He was urged by the Minister of Communication, René Manuel Sadi, to update the status of the enterprise, as Emmanuel Anvemi reports.
Expansion at a time the company in charge of managing the advertisement sector in the country badly needs a push. The Minister of Communication has told him to update the financial and accounting documents of the enterprise and reinforce the company's collaboration with partners while maintaining the strict respects of texts regulating the structure. Amadou Bello, Senior Civil Administrator, who currently serves as Director of General Affairs at the Ministry of Communication, looks forward to working with the entire staff for better results.
To manage the enterprise in order to reach the main goals, the objective listed by the minister. There are too many.
In the presence of a battery of government officials, he has been installed with calls to make Cameroon public expansion better.
In other news, the newly appointed president of the Chamber of Agriculture, Joseph Roland Mata, has been commissioned into his functions. He was installed today by the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Gabriel Mbairobe, who urged the new boss to work for the growth of the agricultural, fisheries and animal husbandry sectors. Joyce Tata tells us more.
He seized the occasion to highlight the challenges which await him, like the implementation of the ongoing project to reinforce agricultural and livestock professional training financed by the European Union for a period of 36 months in the Adamawa East regions, as well as organizing elections at the chamber. A task which the indigene from the East region confesses he is ready to uphold.
I have a lot to do, but I cannot do it alone. I need the collaboration of the other corps so that they can support me in that mission.
CAPEV's basic mission is to ensure the promotion of the interests of farmers, breeders and foresters. The president, Joseph Roland Mata, father of 5, now has a mantle to make the structure live up to its objectives.
And that installation ceremony brings us to the end of the 7:30 news. In another 30 minutes, you'll be in the company of Karine Olivia Bit. Stay tuned to our programs on CRTV. Thanks for watching. Good night. I'll be back tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. God willing. Stay safe.
CRTV News, ici, toute l'info.